Welcome to the second making of lectures, the first one being the behind-the-scenes story of the making of the Mesopotamia exhibit. And the team working on that exhibition moved immediately to working with a fresh set of curators and a fresh set of ideas in the making of the Forbidden City exhibition. And it's my great pleasure this morning to introduce you to Dr. Shen, my colleague, who drove with his endless zeal and enthusiasm this project, a glint in his eye for many years, actually, before it came to be. And so we're going to do this in two parts. You get to hear first from Chen about the early days of the exhibition, and finish with myself, Dave Hollands, the head of creative here, on how we technically actually executed the show.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see everyone here again. And I can't see you because everything dark down there, but I'm sure some of you already know me. I'm Shen. I'm a curator of the Chinese art, and have been working with the teams of the ROM various departments, especially Dave Hollands, in the past through my first traveling exhibitions from China is the Treasures from the Lost Civilization in 2002. Then the next one, probably some of you still remember, is the Terracotta Warrior exhibitions 3 years ago. So basically this is my third one, and within last 12 years. So I've been very busy, and busy is good sometimes, and glad to see you, everyone's back. So today I'm going to talk about the early part of the exhibition, how we put the exhibition together. I think we are doing this program today or this weekend is just about time we have about in the midway of the show, when the show started on March 8th and run through to the Labor Day weekend. And this is just about the midway. And in the midway, the special of these exhibitions is we are able to replace about 50 objects in the show because of the requirement of the conservation for the material, for the objects that are made in the material, like papers and silks and textiles, costumes, that about 50 objects like such has to be replaced, and that just happened the last week. So for those who haven't seen the shows before, you can catch up the story behind it, and also this is an opportunity for you to see them again. For example, the paintings on this picture is no longer there, but we replaced a similar size of paintings of portraits of emperor who built the Forbidden City, and again, leading the story to where, and what about Forbidden City. So the questions people usually ask me is, how long you put the show together like this? And my answer is, more than 2 years. We beginning of the ideas of these shows, we start talking to the Paris Museum in Beijing. Once again, about 250 objects is on loan from the Paris Museum in Beijing. And for my first meeting with them is somehow in the beginning of the 2012. So the question following is, what do you do in these 2 years? All right. So I'm going to take you apart through of this in the next few minutes. Anyway, so first begin with this picture here, and for some of you have been, if you are the frequent travelers, you must be having pleasure to visit this place, the world's most largest imperial palace in the world, and enclosures with such density of architectures. 980 buildings within the complex, wall within the walls. And for those who have been visiting this place, And you certainly are impressed with the grandeurs of architecture, seeing how small your words when you're traveling in this place. But sometimes you probably forgot or overwhelmed by the surroundings and not pay attention to what actually the objects that's displayed over in there. And this is, you probably have heard the story about this is the home for China's last 24 emperors that crossed two dynasties. One is an earlier one is ruled by the Chinese Han peoples, who the imperial family from southern China, and followed by imperial family from northeast China, outside of Great Wars. How the tradition was continued in this place, how the China was built up with their families running the countries in this place, and what their lives about their families. We know this is a place only built for one single man, real man. I mean, the emperor himself. And of course, he has his large extended families and his concubines, his emperors and empress and elders, and thousands of his servants and eunuchs, and limited, invited guests to access to these places. So the challenge from beginning for us is, when we have, say, let's do a Forbidden City exhibitions, the reason we are like to do this Forbidden City, because not only is story itself is so appealing, because we also test from our audience like yourself that people like to know about Forbidden City. So my first challenge is how we transfer the architecture into something like this. All right. So this is about the time that we have to think about how we engage the public like you. Is we are no longer to build exhibitions, just objects in the showcase with silence labels. That I think that I leave that part to Dave to talk about in the second part of this talk. But we need to think about, we're not bringing the artifacts, say, oh, this is artifacts from the Forbidden City. Let's just bring it over here and put a label on here, tell you what it is, how old they are. What we need to do is that we need to think about how we put artifacts together, make connection between them. So the artifacts speaks here in these photos, shows the children's, the young emperors. And what about young emperors? Would the young emperors like normal children? They would like to play the games and they educated themselves like everyone else today? Yes. There are. We have to find a story around there, and so you see another case besides that corner of that photo shows the toys and the playful things for their passing time and for this young emperor. So this is where the beauties of the exhibitions that we're going to create ourselves for our audience. Now that we are taking the commercial package from anywhere else, you see here, there's, and we take it. No, in here at the ROM, as you probably heard from the previous presentations in the other exhibitions, that this show, that the ROM, you always do it for ourselves. So this is the advantages of what we can do, the shows for ourselves in Toronto, for our own audience, and we are able to craft the ideas, what are we going to do. We know the artifacts have story to tell, and what story to tell is more appealing, more meaningful, is we are talking about stories about people, places like Forbidden City, inside Forbidden City, and the objects itself have a story with that. And we, like thinking about how we organize the show. We like to provide the same experience. You would like to walk through the Forbidden City in Beijing, seeing the artifacts, but while we like to experience yourself walking through the 3D, artifacts inside the museum, as also experience that your proceedings from outside of Forbidden City to the outer court of Forbidden City, where the governing events as a whole, that only males were in there, and then you come to the inner court, most intimate areas, that where the family scenes going on, and children's stories and women's stories and the servants' eunuchs, And come down to the last part of the show, or last part of Forbidden City, is Emperor's own private space, where he can cultivate himself, where he's doing his own studies, and for most of the members here, I like to see the treasures. What the emperors have created such a wonderful artwork that sells multi-million dollars on auction house today. So that's where you can see those most, wonderful achievement of the artworks in this place. And of course, with the sections here, we are also providing the themes, you understand the messages well, and try to bring out to the audience, talking about power and privileges, life in the palace, starting collections for the emperors. And the fascinating with the Western culture is also, again, is a new customized for these shows, because when I preparing the shows, I understand many of my audience here is not Chinese. We're not doing the same shows in China or East Asian countries. We understand this connection between the East and the West, and we like to bring the culture back to 18th century, 17th century, that already there's a bridging between China. China is not entirely isolated. There's always been a bridge, Silk Road and the Maritime Road, and being connected to Western. So what are things that has been fascinating about Chinese emperors, Western culture, and the sections about it. And of course, we like to see the transition from Paris Museum to, from the Forbidden City, the Imperial Palace, to the today's Paris Museums. Okay, so that's all stories. Now, back to the days that how I'm going to actually realize all those wonderful ideas through my colleagues to talk about this is really, after you meeting a couple of times with the Paris Museums, your curator said, look, we'd like to do this shows in 2014. Can we do that? Yes, we're very welcome. We like these ideas. We're so enthusiastic about it. So this is all good. We'll have all formalities set up, but then come down to a single person or my colleagues and my assistants with me, say, how the heck I find objects from the $1.8 million supposed to know, but I cannot see a 1.8 million collections in their show. I see this and that, but not all much. But with all these wonderful ideas, how I find these objects to tell this story, or I find objects to tell some other story that I can tell, is really chicken and egg things, okay? So this really struck you for a month in planning, and the first month that I do is sitting in my office in the library, you look at these catalogs. Those are the catalogs that are very fortunate to acquire. There are the 4 sets, and more than of this, only half of it. The 6th volume of like this was published by Paris Museum in Beijing on their collections in the various categories. And you have to go through these pages. And you find I open a page for you, these 2 objects in the show. And this is where the objects that I find your research with my associates, that your research can tell the story that I bring here. And once again, we also must do research that what previous exhibitions related to the Forbidden City that has been took place around the world over the last decade or 2 decades. This is the categories that of the exhibitions in the world in the last decades or more than a decade. You have to study them and then make sure that what we do shows is different from theirs. The messages with ideas will be different, the messages, different objects were different. In this way, I can proudly tell you there's more than about 1/3 of objects of over 80 of objects never seen anywhere in these categories. Their first time traveling outside of China. All right, and of course, all of the objects here are never in Canada alone, because we never had such scale exhibitions in such on the Forbidden City in Canada. But we do have some things familiar, close like in the Chicago, and or some other places. You probably see the catalog in here, is one thing I like to bring, because I do, after 3 months, I do have a lot of feedback from visitors. One of the visitors complained to me is because they say, is this show the same shows that I saw in Chicago Art Institute 10 years ago, almost 10 years, 2005? And I said, no. And she insists that it is, even before she actually came to see the show. The reason for that is because she saw the poster is the same, because most likely everyone using the same enterprise post as we do the same here. This is something I like to discuss with my design teams, what we can make that different. But yes, she insists because she saw that this is the enterprise was sitting on, on the chairs and same costumes, yellow background. Yes, we like to bring the people. We like to bring, these stories about the peoples there. But unfortunately, they only have one uniforms. What do we do about that? So but I can assure you at this opportunity, they are completely different. That's the reason we have this program. Anyway, let's go on for here. So once you have all this sorted out, let's take about like 3-4 months. And then we provide a wish list, right? So Paris Museum has no ideas of what I like to do, but this is about the time that I tell them this is what we like to do. And this is my wish list according to the ideas here. So they look at it, they make some suggestions. They say, some objects may not be available because they're on the tours, they're on the shows, they're in the galleries. So I come back, I make adjustment. And then finally they say, okay, there's some things we can start working. And that's about the time. The times during Christmas holiday, because my associates at our time, they have obligations for workers and the school teachings. And on the picture is Dr. Chen, my co-curators, and besides her is Dr. Cléophée, our curator of textiles of Eastern Hemispheres. So 3 of us to spend a week during the Christmas holiday in 2012. And that is the time we went through most of the objects in their storage areas on our wish list. Some we can confirm the objects that I would like to bring based on our wish list, but of course we need to make an adjustment for those who may not be available, something I'm not satisfied, some things you look at objects that they are not as good as on the pictures, and they have some conservation issues and may not be too fragile to fly. And of course, our curators on the other side very generous supply something else we do not know, and they will be fitting into our themes. But it's the back and forth. Once we have done this process, we went home, we start judging the artifacts, and then we have to wait for the final list. And because some artifacts are now sort of in place, so this we call it content negotiation. So we need to put all the artifacts in place before we can sign agreement. So this will take about a year. But in between, the negotiation sometimes really come to a happy end. I don't think the negotiators really sometimes they take some things away from me, but it's a compromise and some things that can build a story even stronger. For example, at the time when my Chinese colleagues started to realize, the ideas that we're going to put a show in Toronto is not the same that they used to put shows in China or in their gallery. And then we start talking very interesting, area now. So I was telling them that, we like to tell a story. We like to talk about people, the children. We like to see how people eat theirs, of how the children play, and is there any pets, the cats, dogs. At that moment, they just hold it for a second and say, oh, you like that kind of story. We have a dog clothes. Do you want it? I said, wow, okay. I didn't know they have a dog clothes, for Christ's sake, and I don't see any publication in that volume that I've seen before. So they said, we have dog clothes. Do you want it? I said, of course, we want it. So that is becoming the most appealing objects in the show. Probably you can agree with me. And certainly that has come out somewhere. No planning in my office for these objects. And that is the one, looks like big dogs, and he has a name attached to this cloth, beautiful silky wound. and told 40, the name called Big Luck. And now he finished his duty. He's going back to stage now, and we bring a picnics to the stage. And so the one you're going to see today down there is a picnic clothes. And his name is called Little Huang. Right? So we bring the story about people. We tell the story about emperors. And this the emperor is our highlight, one of the emperors. The highlight, we have 8 panels of this like this. You may not want to miss it because, again, the characteristics of our shows at ROM is we bring the stories more than just objects. So if you are focused on the time on objects, I would urge you to spend some time on the text that we are providing. And I really do appreciate that. I do appreciate that you pick up the mistakes, typos for me because I know you read it. So I do receive the emails from the audience to tell me the typos or mistakes there. So I really appreciate that. So keep doing that. And we like to preface of this emperor. So the emperor himself, who have a great father who ruled the country for 60 years. I always compare him with like a Prince Charles. So he has waited for a long time until the day he came to the throne, only ruled the country for 13 years. But he had a great son, the Emperor Chen, who ruled the country for another 63 years. So this is really making a challenge in the 18th century, entire 18th century, to make China great nations in the East, and this is where it comes from. And his ladies. Don't forget about that. And about the place to play stories this is the place where we are introduced to places and objects associated with places. And you can do this with panels. You can see this is from the iPad. And this is the way really it can serve as your tour guide. If you are planning to go to China again, you can first start with this iPad information and panel information to make note of that. So next time you come to China with your tour guide and say, look, I want to see the palace of this, give me some time, not just you taking me through the central axles, from the south gate to north gate, let's down. There's so many stories that you can see on the outside. There's the imperial palaces for the emperors, emperor dowagers on the both east and the west side of the inner court, and they have so many, intruding stories. And I want you to start from here and take it to China, not the other way around. Because you never get a chance to see those pieces when you have tour guides rush you through the door. Now, the object of stories, that is also a feature that I like to bring to you. And for these pairs, the objects over on the other side is the ROM's collection. The small one is the ROM collection, and the larger one is we borrowed from Paris Museum for the show. They were made 1,000 years ago by the emperor of the Song Dynasty as a whole set of 336. When the emperors falls apart, the pieces was falling apart. Some pieces was taken to another court of dynasty and scratched off their titles and make another titles, engrave another titles on the bells, which is our pieces on the left. And the other was remaining as it is because there's the bells was made by the emperor of the Song Dynasty, Song Huizong, and have title with it and becoming more collectible in the history afterwards. And this piece has been a part for 1,000 years, and for the very first time, they united in Toronto. And because we have this object itself, and I particularly request the other one to be united here. So these are the stories that we bring in here. So to summarize, I got a couple of slides to run before I turn to Dave, but I think Dave is going to tell you, how we actually put the content and the design together because we are working in the same ideas with those words. The great show like this, you have to have good ideas, which I just talked about it. And you have to have a relevancy. The relevancy is at where the people can see what I'm interested to see the people, to see things from past. Of course, there's some surprise you don't know that I'm going to talk about, my colleagues will attack. There's some surprise you see just like the one, the dark clothes, challenges and funs. So I'm going to very quickly here, the ideas is what we just talking about. You have the transitions. You have to talk about the various angles of the lives there. You are not using just about artifacts itself. You're also using the panels, text, and the multimedia, of course. And I'm very proud of one product that my associates, my assistants have to help me to build is a big chart of, of official structures of the imperial department. We call it Imperial Household Department. Actually, this department runs everything in the imperials. If you can read through what kind of department they're responsible for, you know they actually run an imperial city, imperial palace, just like a nation. Relevancy, we bring artifacts that really, not unfamiliar with that what we use. We have ice box, like modern freezers. They keep the ice cubes in the boxes to keep things cool, just as function as our pieces here. Our refrigerator here, you drive your car at a time, the emperor is using the sedans in his ways, traveling in the Forbidden City, and the bathtubs. So objects and a picnic, there's another one if you take a close look at. It's my great proud of objects that a single case for a layout of a picnic basket. It's such wonderful pieces there. And the surprises is sometimes you're getting things unexpected to know, a wonderful story that you have not prepared to tell your my visitors. For example, we prepared this a great sets of the emperors, but what I did not see and I did not know, and no one actually published anything about it, is the beautiful drawings of gold inlaid on the black lacquers of running dragons and the city dragons on the back of this screen. And that is come to surprise, and a surprise to our designers who have not put the enough space for you to see on the back. So we actually had to make, hours a day to push the screen forward. So if you haven't seen the back of the screen, please go to see it. And the challenges, there are various challenges, various areas of challenges, but also challenges where how we can make these old packages come to Toronto on time. Do we have delayed flights? Do we have a problem with the weathers? With we all actually packing it properly? And the one thing is really worried about me before actually we can put things together is the ivory materials on this 19th, 18th century of imperial seals on the last case of the show, because the ivory and the other corals and the other pieces is designated as endangered species. You have a special permit in both countries that takes months. You wouldn't believe that how long that one takes. And the customer clearance, even though they are in the pure sense, you may not be able to get the time to run. So I had to request to remove that beautiful plaques from the objects to make these pieces can arrive. So if you're going down to see these pieces in the last the case, you will not be see the beautiful original 18th century, 17th century ivory plaques to have titles of these seals engraved. Sorry, that is the challenge. And of course, there's fun part of it, because when I request for this chicken cup, and I know it's such a sentimental to Chinese community because I know so valuable of this chicken cup and so rare of this chicken cup is because only 17 of these chicken cup survived in the world, and mostly in the Paris Museum, and only 5 in the museums outside of China, only 3 in the private hand, and one of these 3 was sold in Hong Kong 2 months ago for 37 million Canadian dollars. If you haven't read the newspaper. And I'm going to turn over this. And I told my designers at the time 2 years ago, tell them I need one single case for this chicken cup, and they don't get it. They say, why Chen want to have this chicken cup? This is so taking me so much of a real estate, right? So I let Dave to talk to you about how to accommodate my requests like such. And that was really a fun part to working with the designer teams, and you appreciate what they're putting both things together with here. Before I go away, take this here. I have a couple of slides to show you. If you want to know more about story, that an object stories here, there's a souvenir books, the selling the stories, and this is part of a tradition you're probably familiar with. But you probably want to ask me, for so many objects that have not been seen outside of China, why don't you produce a catalog, a full catalog? Next time you could tell my director that you're going to buy the full catalogs. We can do it because we lack of funding to produce a full, expensive full catalogs. And we really help to proceed with that, full publication, full catalogs. But to compromise that, if some of you like to read more, the deep stories about our mind, our curatorial mind, about this story. And I especially made arrangement with this magazine to make special issues of orientation. This English magazines based in Hong Kong of Eastern Asia arts. And this, we have 5 articles in there to bring more depth stories of these stories about Forbidden City. Thanks very much, everyone. Dave, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Chen. And handing off to me is a very natural thing in terms of the order of operations of getting one of these projects done. And you must imagine if you send that email about the typo to Chen, you can understand who he's going to forward it to next. And as well, all of the complaints we receive about not being able to read the labels and the contrast not being sufficient and so on, that comes immediately to our team. And one of the things we have done actually that was quite unusual in this particular exhibition, owing to the fact that we were able to go back in with Palace Museum staff halfway through the project and change out another number of objects, is that we've been able to address a lot of visitor input and member input. And so that's been a privilege and something that we feel has given a betterment to the exhibition in a way that we wouldn't customarily be able to do. I'm going to start by showing something that our web team created. Chen referred to the iPad app experience. And this is something that we felt that we really wanted to represent the place of the Forbidden City in a way that was a virtual visit. And so you can go on our website and look at the Forbidden City in an interactive way by driving around on the place and exploring the places, and out of that draw the stories of the people and the objects. So this is a little filmic introduction that they created for all of the iPad stations. And the experience of coming to the exhibition allows you to dig in deeper. So what you can get by going to our website is a visit in a very general educational sense of what the places are there. But you must go to the exhibition to get into the outer court, the inner court, and the Emperor's private spaces. And it's interesting that the web team used these Google tools to create this. You don't actually have to come in very far from outer space to see this perfectly proportioned rectangle. It's so vast. And visitors who have had the pleasure of touring the Forbidden City have told us how arduous it is actually to transit the entire place to get a proper tour. And this is something we took on board when we were considering, well, what might we do to emulate the experience in some way of being at the Forbidden City. And this, of course, is a constant challenge, despite real production capacity and reasonable budgets, to be able to immerse you in some way into the past and into these distant places. So here is one of the pages from the iPad experience. It begins in our Thorsell Spirit House here just off the lobby for free. before you buy a ticket to go to the exhibition. But it really does give you a really basic overview. And here you can see the moat that surrounds the Forbidden City, and then this central axis that Chen referred to in his talk. In the canon of Chinese design, symmetry and balance, very, very important, and not in an absolutely rigorous way where everything on this side is identical to everything on this side. And that's where the idea of balance comes in that there's the central axis. It expresses the principal idea of the emperor and his power. But there are all kinds of various functional things that need to be different throughout the city. And so long as what you build over here has some kind of equivalency over here, they can be different in a kind of yin-yang way. All of this is realized in the creation of the actual place. And so here we have this very rigidly ordered series of outer courts, enormous courtyard spaces designed to really show off the emperor's power, and very filled with daylight, hot kind of places without much in the way of plantings. And then the yin for this yang, the inner courts, have these beautiful courtyards with plantings and a much more organic design. And this is something that we felt we could really work with through the course of the exhibition and the arc of the story to take you from this outer court and the majesty of a place where thousands of people would kowtow before the emperor, a place with real people in the thousands that occupied it, and to a growing sense of intimacy, to pace your visit, to be taken from these semi-public places where people would arrive by invitation only, to places that you would never go unless you lived there, into the inner courts, which were the precincts for the women, the families, the children, consorts, and the many thousands of servants. So here's the team at the outset. There were, of course, over 100 people working on the exhibition, but in the core group, including, you see here, a curator, Wenchen Chang, and the other designers, interpretive planners, Jane Liu here in the foreground, who's a curatorial volunteer, energetic and nimble and able to solve any problem. And so here at the outset, we've got the team taking this incredible pool of objects designed through the negotiation with the Palace Museum to cover off this vast story over the long period of time, the many areas of the city, the many aspects of life. And we have this real pleasure of being able to group and regroup the objects in this initial phase to figure out how to tweak the story to create highlights and to create interesting combinations. We create these fridge magnets in our own studio and put them up on the, what becomes the meeting room where we spend many, many hours. So here are the groupings as we finally arrived at them for the objects. And this is a constant reference point for us in understanding this tour through the city that you'll be able to take when you visit the actual exhibition. So curators Wen Chen, and not shown here, Sarah Fee, who is the textile specialist, and Jen Fei, PhD student, constantly being challenged to feed the data that the team needs in order to write the story, find all of the images, get them approved for use in our application, and constantly keep the team up to the level of understanding, and to completely authenticate everything that is planned for the exhibition. So there's always a test here to make sure that anything that will be shown is shown with accuracy, with historical accuracy. The design group at the outset is working from a design brief to, in their very first step, create a concept package. And this is something that's shared right up through the hierarchy of ROM executive till it's approved, and then we move forward with this brief. And so here we see inspirational images for how we might represent the outer court. And we consider the possibility of this really kind of dramatic, operatic place as being something that could be inspired literally by theater and by opera. And so we see images that the designers have put together here from other sources that were ideas for how we might be able to represent an experience of the city through theatrical technique. Moving into the inner court, you see this idea of a growing sense of familiarity with the people that are in there, a sense of more human scale. And there are a couple of images here that were pivotal for us as reminders of how we would develop the individual components moving forward. One of them is what we came to call the shadowy characters. And this initially started out as an idea for having representations of people long past who just show up in a kind of fugitive way. And this eventually evolved into something that we cultivated very specifically for children in order to animate particular stories, real people that worked in this place or lived in this place and conducted their business or acted out their lives. And this one here I particularly like, this kind of expressionist stage set with the veil being pulled back. And we really thought that this was a motif that we could work with, the idea of lifting the veil on the innermost places of the city to give you a privilege of visiting in ways that historically you would not have been permitted. We felt that subset of characters that Chen spoke about was something that we could really highlight, and this became a cast of characters that we were able to introduce on the website before the exhibition opened to start to build some familiarity. So we have Emperor Yongzhen, Chen Long, the Dowager Empress, a whole host of anonymous consorts and concubines, and then all of the other hangers-on at court, eunuchs and servants and artists and civic officials and so on. And we looked at this as a source of inspiration. This is actually a poster from Chinese soap opera. This is something that Chen introduced us to as a team. Can't remember what this one is called, the Sacred Heart or something. And this is a woman who time travels from a modern Chinese city to a life of intrigue and romance in the Forbidden City. And this is a very much watched set of programs among several dramas that really are the Coronation Street of Chinese TV. And so there's a huge amount of interest in the subject matter of the goings-on, the life behind the scenes in the Forbidden City, something that we wanted all of our viewers to feel. We actually showed a few stills from the soap operas in our focus groups when we were trying to find out what would resonate with our audiences. And in a kind of activity where you sort from available pictures the things that look of interest to you, every team that came in and looked at the pictures picked the soap opera pictures first. And then we started to tell more and more about the object images and the emperor images and so on, and then we declared that these were actually taken from a soap opera. They were immediately devalued. Oh, just a soap opera. But what we learned from this is that, yes, but the magnetism of the human story is still one of the really big draws to any historical story, and that we really wanted to have a thread running through the exhibition that will work with the characters. And so much of the artifact material that was a part of Chen's successful negotiation with the Palace Museum collection, just very in and of itself, would portray very clearly all kinds of detail about the intimate and not seen environments of people living in the Forbidden City. This hidden world of the consorts and concubines, the many, many who just entirely lived out their lives there. These vast scenes that are on some of these very large scroll paintings, where you can go in and see individual portrayals of faces, all kinds of activities, and really get a sense of the diversity, the rich goings-on of this largely hidden place. And these great moments, Chen had this picture in his presentation of this emperor who was fascinated with Western style and had himself painted up in the style of the French court, in the dress of the day. Objects that really spoke to this incredible elite one-of-a-kind qualities of life there. This is a gold cup meant only to be touched by the emperor on his birthday. These fans, richly decorated, incredibly fragile objects that were placed at the ready in every one of the throne settings, made available for use to keep the emperor cooled. And then this one particular emperor who, if you imagine, if you have access to every artisan, craftsperson, and factory, workshop in the country, and the entire history of every dynastic artwork produced before your time, his own ability to create his private collection for his own personal viewing only allowed us to build this really kind of crescendo experience in the exhibition that focused it on the treasures of an emperor that would not be seen by any other. So, having come up with this kind of central theme of things that were concealed that we could ultimately reveal, we started to work with our ad agency, LaPlaca Cohen, on how we might visualize this in the marketing scheme. And so it started to produce ideas like this of looking through the veil at what life was like inside. And their first early concepts worked directly with what was already there in the Forbidden City in terms of its design and architecture. And here you see the moat surrounding the Forbidden City. Inside of that is an 8-meter-high wall, and there are only 4 bridges and gateways that are the access points, the cardinal points. This is the central axis here, the inner sanctums. And this is something that they could really felt they could work with to start to build an understanding of a walled city. And so this became an element that we use variously, showing that there was a place of great privilege that had rare things to be held inside and viewed. We worked up different ways in which we could really hammer that home with the title of the exhibition. And then these were early explorations from the design team to start to imagine how this imperial authority worked together with the place in a way that everything, all the goings on in this location were governed by a single person. And this is an early idea that we felt we could actually take some of the objects and semi-conceal them and somewhat reveal them. And so this was something that said, why couldn't we take one of these paintings and use the part of it that really clearly expresses the cultural idioms, the really luxurious aspects of the design of this place, and the personality not fully revealed. And this, of course, became the beginnings of a campaign for promoting the exhibition, where we explored real extremes of, well, how much can we hide this thing without showing it, to suggest the fact that a visit to the exhibition will give you the entire story. So these were early concepts. Ultimately, we landed somewhere close to this, where we took this motif of these banners that you would see throughout the actual place and used that as a way of semi-concealing the content of the exhibition. And then in consultation with our Chinese advisory committee, we really wanted to find a way to include the script of the Chinese language, and in this case, the 4 characters used to express the title of the place. And so this is the final concept, where the idea of the banner is more literally expressed with a little roll at the bottom, the way they're actually displayed in the exhibition. Building this pattern repeat into the background in order to carry the Chinese texts. And then this is something that we were able to roll forward into all kinds of formats. So our own video production staff created the TV ad that you may have seen. And this is one of the early storyboards where we felt we could actually take that idea of the emperor's portrait and through animation cover it up with the banners. This is something that we could do with moving image in order to really carry the idea of something that you'll be able to see the whole story for when you arrive. Meanwhile, what's going on in behind the scenes? A team of preparators going to the Palace Museum after the objects have been selected and trying to document in as much detail as possible in a very short period of time everything they can about the mounting and size and display requirements for all of the individual pieces. It's a huge amount of data that is really useful for all concerned from each of their perspectives, marketing, mount makers, display technicians of all kinds. The design staff working to create construction drawings in order to get this out to bid, in order to secure a fabricator for the exhibition. And here you can see the outline of how the show works in plan view. And this is the very structured outer court, symmetrical. You can see here the principal axis expressed, everything symmetrically arranged. This is the throne setting you see when you first enter the exhibition. And then a switch to this soft line here where you move through into the inner court, and there's a much more meandering path. And then back into the most intimate spaces, these very, very nested inner courtyards where the emperor had his own private studios, where his own collections for his own viewing pleasure would have been kept. And my favorite building, they all have these wonderful names, was the building that the one emperor built nearing his retirement, which he called the Studio of Exhaustion from Diligent Service. And so we very quickly, as a team, we all wanted to pick our favorite building name to apply to our own workspace, and everybody was arm wrestling over that particular one. So the story of one particular set of objects. This is one grouping that we knew would be an absolute highlight for the exhibition, and rather than build towards showing this near the end of the show as a highlight, we took the risk of just putting it up right up front in the entrance experience as something that you would literally turn the corner and say, wow. And we often refer to building wow into our exhibitions. I hate the expression, but I actually had the pleasure of standing there many times and hearing visitors turn the corner and say exactly that. And the objects that make up this particular vignette are in and of themselves really important, really richly decorated. And as Chen explained, the back of this screen that we felt we could just park against the wall is also beautifully designed. And so we wondered, well, how in our exhibition hall with a 16-foot high ceiling could we make sure that even something of this scale would not be lost? And often things are dwarfed in that space. And we looked as examples at the actual installations of these kind of throne settings in the Forbidden City. And there are all these other kinds of elements that contribute to the sense of scale and monumentality, not the least of which you can see here one of these imperial carpets. And we had for a brief moment the possibility of bringing one of these carpets to include in the vignette until it was learned that we couldn't actually park the furniture on it. It was an object of some fragility. And so we looked 100 ways from Sunday at how we might be able to display this thing. The air transport costs were monumental, given it was an extremely long object when rolled up. And so we ultimately decided to represent it instead with a graphic that we made ourselves. You can see the other kinds of architectural details in the real settings. This is this wonderful picture I love of the Dowager Empress. It looks like a completely staged shot with this kind of theater backdrop, this fabric backdrop put in behind. And that was a kind of cue for the idea of building something that wasn't literally the architecture of the throne setting in one of these palace buildings, but something that really would kind of theatrically or operatically express the ideas of power that go with this vignette. So these are early concept drawings the graphic designer and dimensional designer were working on. Inspired by the idea of these Chinese scripts that are in these accordion fold packages. And we thought, well, here's something that we could do, to just build a backdrop that would create an in-between the size of the room and scale down to the scale of the objects. The initial idea of doing this in the regal purple, which is the color that connects the emperor as the son of power that comes to him from heaven. And at the very last minute opted, I think I'm quite happy with the fact that we've opted for the imperial yellow instead, because of the way it works much better in concert with the object. And also cut back on certain things, decided not to use the imperial dragon here, given the richness of the detail that's on the actual objects. constructional drawings for the creation of that setting, the idea of a series of pierced screens that could be created with these modern computer cutting techniques used as a motif in the exhibition. We had engineers work out the strength of the ceiling in order to hang this thing for the safety of people working under it, and of course the rarity and importance of the object. We didn't want this thing falling down on them. This crazy thing you see in the background there, I'm quite proud of the fact that we recycle so many bits from old exhibitions. These are bits of, you could recognize them from their various colors. I can, from the Maya exhibition, the Ultimate Dinosaurs show, various other things all kind of patched together and then painted over to recycle the walls. So here you see all the hanging points, all worked out with the computer for their length in order to install these lightweight special fabricated metal panels. All had to be installed in time, and then this is this great moment where we have everybody who has a stake in the actual layout of these pieces in the exhibition. There you can see the digitally produced print of a carpet. Our designer, graphic designer Emilio, was able to use a book of period references of other carpets to scan the individual motifs, and then in Photoshop he introduced fake wear on the carpet. And so here you see one of these feathered fans, the Palace Museum staff. It was learned, despite all of the pre-research that we had done, Chen spoke about surprises, how absolutely fragile these things were. And so we had to introduce, very last minute, a number of fabrications for mounts to strengthen things. So you see this little piece we had to put in the back here, painted out to match the background in an effort to make it disappear and still do its job of support. This lovely pair of cranes installed by Dave and Oleg, a couple of our very experienced preparators, who always work in collaboration where one person has the job of calling out what is going to happen so that everyone works in concert, and to connect things together with these nitrile gloves so that the objects aren't handled with the oil of what's on your hands. This is one of the senior staffers from the Palace Museum group that come and supervise every aspect of installation. And in this case, a lot of last minute changes that were made for the better. In this case, there's kind of humorous moment about exactly how we position this pair, what might be the most historically accurate way of presenting them, how do they face forward or sideways, which one was on the left, which was on the right. Working with our volunteer Jane here to discuss the many alternatives. Here she is showing the pose of one of the cranes, and we're saying, well, the feet were done in such a way that it really suggests that the orientation of it ought to be, a scene, the two of them coming in from either side like this. So after much debate, repositioning of all the objects with great care, we all stood back, took a sigh of relief, and then realized that the throne in the middle was off-center, off that central axis by about an inch. So they went back in, the very gracious team, they went back in and just adjusted everything just slightly to put it absolutely dead symmetrical center. And here it is. Many other aspects of care taken with the devil being in the details. This is that pulling back the veil idea of exiting from the outer court into the inner courts, working with a professional staging company that do set decorations and theatrical curtains. This doesn't look like much here, but they had to work to really make sure that the gathers worked. It was tailored so that that swag had the appearance of that inspirational image. And this was done by actually cutting the rectangular shape in a very particular way so that it would swag back like this and give us just this moment of entry into the inner courts that we had imagined. So there's a tweet from a day that we had here where very professional calligraphers came and gave our graphic designer, Amelia, the idea of some of the Chinese texts in the exhibition really ought to carry the human hand and really ought to look handmade. And so many of the Chinese fonts out there looked very mechanical, so that for all of the title panels, we were able to use these beautiful handmade things by scanning them and working with them in the graphic design. We used this screen motif from the real place and created a yin screen and a yang screen, one for the inner court and one for the outer court, computer cut by the fabricator. And having the facility of cutting with computer, we could do unusual things, and the designer created this kind of morph effect where it's solid at the top, more so than at the bottom. And this was the idea that we would be able to seductively place a little touchable reproduction object in behind in every instance, and hide the view up to the lighting fixtures that were used to light that so they wouldn't glare in your eyes. So the idea, when you look up, you wouldn't see all the mess of light fixtures and ceiling looking up, but your focus would be down here in the object, semi-concealed in behind. So there's one of them just built that way. This is the sort of thing you might not notice if you're actually there, but the kind of thing that designers deeply care about, because everything contributes to a whole experience. Staff artist Georgia Gunther created these wonderful, robust, touchable reproduction artifacts, which we now have in most of our exhibitions. Everybody likes to touch things, and it really gives an ability to do it in a way that we can keep you away from the real things. It means a lot of research about these objects before they actually arrive, because it's a very lengthy process. So Georgia actually has to work entirely from photographs. And so the preparators take these scale measurements. You can just see this lovely dragon wrapping itself around this vase. And she had to create this out of a kind of resin. I don't know if she works in these magical materials that are hard for our visitors to break. Although every now and then we do break one, and she has to glue it back together again. This is the Forbidden City rendered in a kind of schematic form that we used as a tactile. So if you couldn't see, you'd be able to at least get a sense of the really basic zoning of the city, of its outer and inner sanctum. Here, all of those elements coming together, the idea of real fabric banners used to introduce the sections. You can see this morphing screen, hiding the lights up in here. The introduction of character stories here with backlit panels that we recycled from the Mesopotamia show. And then these three vignettes here that were used to tell the stories of life activities going on behind the scenes. These beautiful, large-scale paintings of the 12 beauties. And so about the filmic material, we have, as I mentioned, a video producer who works on the team. And so some of the video work is done in-house. Some of it is using inspirational imagery. This is from one of the soap operas. We wanted to envision the life of the emperor issuing an imperial edict, for example. So we worked with an outside animation company. They hired a Chinese-Canadian illustrator and animator to create these characters. So here we are in one of our production meetings. This is an early draft of the emperor promoting an official. And we very quickly came to the idea that there were Chinese shadow puppet historical precedents. And so every aspect of these puppets, if you will, represented with computer imagery, was vetted through the curatorial staff. How long was the mustache? Is he holding his pen in the correct calligraphic manner? Is his hat tilted at the right angle, and so on? Great care taken to get it all right. And this one, which I really quite love, it's the emperor who, having amassed a private collection, created his own kind of series of likes or two thumbs up by inscribing right on the artworks his feelings about them. And so there's a list of terms, wonderful, endearing, or different qualities of the works that were written on them. And so we took these marks from the artworks, and our curator wrote them out by hand, and we videotaped the creation of the characters with the strokes being done in the correct order in order to project them on the floor here. You can see one of the characters being built. And children just absolutely love this because they trace it with their feet. You can see here, this is the iPad station for the visit to the emperor's inner sanctum. So here's Rob, the video producer, Courtney, the interpretive planner, Chen, and Chen, two of the three curators, Sarah Fee being the textile specialist not showing in this image here, going through the storyboards for the documentaries at the end, where we're wrapping up all the loose ends about, well, what became of the Forbidden City? And if you think of the creation of an exhibit as being somewhat parallel to creation of a film, we have on the right there the authors of the original story. And in the middle there, in the role of the interpretive planner, the person that did the screenplay. You know, how do you write it for an audience? And then the film producer there, well, what is the actual story arc, and what's the actual representation in terms of treatment? So here you have these two opposing documentaries that really tell you the tale of the last dying days of imperial occupancy of the city, and then what became of the place and its collections until it became a museum. So this is an early draft showing the film technique that Rob was recommending, often used for documentaries, where we're able to take this rich collection of stills, historical stills, but cut out pieces and then have them individually animate in order to give a sense of life to something that's otherwise quite frozen. We're able to do the same thing with this large-scale painting that we weren't able to get a painting that we were interested in having that would show this vast expanse of the city, because the painting was huge. The air shipping costs were enormous. The cost of a case of that size was enormous. So we ended up with a high-definition image, very generously supplied by the Palace Museum, that we were able to animate. This is the computer model that the designers built of the entire exhibition, with some of these ideas inserted into it. And in this case, this is an animatic, it's called. Where we work with animation company Meld Media, who go in Photoshop, they isolate all the individual characters from the painting and then give them motion. So here's, in the storyboard we said, I think at this point, camera comes into close-up shot of Dowager Empress's entourage being carried in her sedan chair through one of the great gates. And then the next step would be camera moves outwards to mid-shot, showing the tail end of the emperor's entourage, and so on. And so we were able to really bring some life to something that we didn't even have on display as a stand-in for the real thing. Other kinds of technical work going on, incredible care taken to make sure that the climatic controls for sensitive objects are there. So a series of documents that are meant to make sure that right up to the last minute that the things are going in the right places and have the right climate. This is one of our cases where the base of the case is being prepared to make sure that the right kind of silica gel is put in there to maintain a dry environment for that object. The objects arrive. Logistical problem of this huge amount of material taking up a lot of space. It has to be done in a very sequential way. The design of these cases is something that is co-created with the Lending Museum. We have one preparator on our staff here, Dave Bush, whose entire training and specialty, he's worked here for many decades. His entire responsibility is coming up with these interior designs for these crates in order to ensure that things arrive intact. And then there's these really wonderful moments where the crates are opened up. The teams work in concert with our staff and the Palace Museum staff to make sure that things are safely brought from storage and put on display. This doesn't look like much, but this is one of the beautiful scroll paintings. One of the great things about scroll paintings is you can roll them up, and they're very portable. But they have all kinds of very special needs. And in our case, we've never had display cases so large as the idea of having to protect these rare objects. So this is on the left here, Gene from our team has 30 years plus experience at the ROM. There's nothing this guy doesn't know about protecting and showcasing artifact collections. And then winners of the fabrication bid, master builder Gregory there on the right, and his right-hand man, Jack, who've built many things for us, co-creating with us these amazing display cases. They don't look like much because we really want them to recede into the background, but they're doing their job. And this is a rig that they created that tilts, that was used to deliver the cases to the site because they were so big they had to fit on the diagonal down the hallways and into the elevators. And then they pivot into a horizontal. We ordered the largest acrylic sheets that you can buy, special order from the US. These are all of the scrolls in the vault, just preparing to go out. You can see our staff and the Palace Museum staff working to attach them in a variety of ways that protects them so that no undue stress is placed on them. And here you see a plastic tube that's being used for a scroll that was too long even for our tall space, so that we could roll up the top of it a little bit for display. And so there's a little isolating layer here of mylar, which is used to as a barrier between any kind of material that you wouldn't want to be in direct contact with an artifact. In this case, a plastic tube might have plasticizers that are off-gassing from it. You don't want that to be touching the object. And then the object is carefully attached. This is a sock of lead weights that are used to hold the thing in open position so it doesn't re-roll itself while we're working on it. Tied up and then installed in these cases. The staff working to health and safety standards with all of their training and harness gear, the case being closed up, another one being installed. And you have this tendency of these long rolled up objects to curl at the edges. So the Palace Museum has this technique of putting these acrylic weights, they're just sitting there, just enough to prevent that from happening. And so here they are installed in the case, and actually, they're fairly invisible. But now that I've told you about you can look for them. And one of these, in this case, we wanted extra psychological room around the object being so massive, so that this is the largest sheet of acrylic you can buy. And we added these little sidebar bits here just so that the space felt as generous as it needed to be. Locks that when pushed in become flush, this beautiful aluminum finish that they put on here to neutralize the look. A hidden caster. The door is so big it has to roll across the floor. There's an amount of suction created. The big thing, if you imagine opening this, you have to get it open initially and then pull it open without a visible handle on the case. And this is one of the Palace Museum staff recording details of the object with the door open. And there's something that we do where we condition report how things arrive, and then when they're about to leave, what kind of state they're in. Is, if you can imagine, it's a bit like walking around at the car rental place and noting the dings on the outside. We want to make sure that everything arrives the way it was sent and goes home the same way. So here we are actually during one of the change-outs, removing those plexiglass holders. Melissa from our registration staff taking her own record photographs, and then this very careful work that's done. You can see one of them being handed over. It always has to be a receiving surface, working together with the Palace staff to roll it up and put it away safely. Last minute things, these set of elements here, originally put on that mylar I was telling you about to isolate them from the painted surfaces of the interior of the display case. And you just felt the subway going by again. So we're concerned about vibration in this hall, not so much from the subway, but from passersby and the mechanical system. So we replaced that. Bob, the lighting technician, doing last minute work. You can see him in his sock feet there, operating inside of the cases, fiber optic lighting. These lovely textile pieces that had to be supported in a way that wouldn't put undue stress on the objects. So Oleg here, you can see built inside, this is a magnet covered in a fabric that's permitted to touch the inside of the piece. And then this panel is a steel panel covered in fabric. And so you can actually tilt it up, and it's magnetically supported in a way that distributes the load of the piece over that magnet. There it is on display. Another robe with this kind of crinoline that's on the inside to provide additional support so that it fleshes it out a little bit. It's so important for this really key sightline in the exhibition that we featured this piece. A mount for a very heavy dish with a foot that's supported by this support. Objects ranging from very delicate to this 250 kilogram bell. The supports for it that come from China. We use these harnesses and lifts with our forklift. And then Chen asked me, I must include the story of the chicken cup. A piece of incredible delicacy. Porcelain really at the height of the game of the creation of Ming porcelain. Lovely translucency. And so we had it on this little frosted acrylic mount. This is Bill installing it in the case. Has to be done in a way your fingers are underneath so you can sense when it touches down, and then you remove your fingers carefully. And we stood back and looked at this thing, and everybody said, you know what, it's not high enough. And we had the Palace Museum staff here for another few days, so we rushed this plinth into construction. And this is a frosted plinth made with perfect miters. We put it in the case. Last day the couriers were here. Everyone stood around and looked at it and said, looks horrible. Way too distracting from the actual object. So here's a mock-up that we did just recently at the time of the changeout with a perfectly clear acrylic, solid acrylic cube with a stand-in artifact we created. And it was meant to arrive frosted from the fabricator and didn't. Very last minute. And we thought, let's just try it and see. So this is Bill. He spent about 25 minutes cleaning it, so there were no fingerprints on it. Placing the cup, touching it down. And here, it looks like $1 million. Of course, you know it's worth far more than that now. And we were so happy there was applause. And it has just the right amount of light diffracting up from the acrylic piece to underlight the paintings on the object. I just want to finish, Chen mentioned fun with this story. This was a fun piece of work for me. Former curator John Vollmer did this research on how these imperial robes were actually fabricated. And in many instances, the incredible embroidery was placed onto a rectangular bolt of fabric and then later cut out and assembled. And a lot of these unassembled bolts actually exist. You can still buy these at auction, and the ROM has a number of them in their collection. So we wanted to create a costume for our actor, Wayne. He's been everything from a dinosaur here to a Mayan priest and now an emperor. And so this is one of these pre-embroidered bolts. We photographed it. This is a curatorial or textile technician, Carla, with our graphic designer. He worked to size the photograph of the object to the actor's body measurements, and then incredible rich embroidery. This is a volunteer, seamstress Vanessa from the Stratford Festival, created this costume for us, assembled it, and here's Wayne. And so this is done with a computer digital print rather than embroidery. So not a bad simulation. And I just want to end with this. Curators Wen, Chen, and Chen, too modest probably to have included an image like this in their own shows, but I just wanted you to see. Here they are at the Palace Museum selecting an object. This is this incredibly rare double-shaped vase covered with these brilliantly detailed flying bats. And I got to tell you, they were like kids in a candy store at the Palace Museum working with these selections. And in the panoply of auspicious symbols, bats are the luckiest. And so I have to say that every team member really was very, very lucky to have worked with curatorial staff and shared in their incredible enthusiasm, which I think you'll find shows in the product of the exhibition. And of course, we also have that great benefit, which was to learn and share in their vast knowledge. And here we have 2 PhDs familiar with working with the ROM collection, which is among the world's great Chinese collections. And still, it's as if every day was starting over again. And so it is for us. Thank you.